Welcome back, my friends. Jake here. Today on the channel, we're going to do another question and answer video. Once a month on the community tab, my YouTube channel, I'll put out a question prompt such as this one. Down below, you can ask me anything about anything, read each other's questions, and thumbs up the ones you want me to respond to. I'm going to respond to as many top-ranked questions as I can in today's video. The cutoff was 75 thumbs up. Thank you to everyone who participated, left a question, or read each other's questions. The top-ranked question was from Michael Boone. Here's what he asks. Is it time to lift the embargo on Western weapons being used on targets inside of Russia? Our leaders need to have that conversation. This is going to have a mixed answer. And up front, the United States is never going to give permission for Ukraine to use weapons on Russian territory. The current position is Ukraine can use US-donated weapons in the occupied territories, including Crimea, but not inside of the 1992 borders of modern Russia. The reason why is 5,880 nuclear weapons. The United States also has 5,000. These two countries can never go to war with each other. This would be a civilization-ending event. So the United States isn't going to change their position. They're going to help Ukraine defend their own territory, but never go on the offensive inside of Russia's borders. But every other country in NATO or the West can do whatever they want. The United States, I don't believe, is pressuring France or Germany or the UK to do anything they don't want to do. So if French donated weapons or British donated weapons, it's up to their governments to give permission to use those donated weapons on the territory of Russia. And this is already happening. Ukraine is free to bomb Russia with our weapons, according to Finland. Finland is comfortable making this calculation that if Finnish weapons are being used on Russian territory, Russia's not going to nuke Finland. So this is up to each individual country. I know this is going to be a headache for the Ukrainians to status track where all these weapons came from, and if they have permission to use them on Russian territory. But, you know, nuclear Armageddon is the reason why it's so complicated. Next question actually comes from Ukraine. I'm writing from Kyiv, and I just want to thank you for your job, for your contribution into our future victory. You give us hope when everything seems so desperate, when Russians are hitting our city and we spend hours in bomb shelters. Life is returning to normal after each airstrike. But somehow your videos are giving us light in the end of the tunnel when everything seems so gloomy. I only wish I could be doing more as just one American on the other side of the world. And I often think about this event, the liberation of the city of Kherson. I still think about Ukrainian citizens living in the occupied territories, looking forward to this day. I do believe that at some point in the next 2 years, Russia is going to experience an economic or political collapse, and their military on the battlefield is going to roll over. People say this is not a good war strategy, but given historical precedents of the last 100 years, Russia is the country in the world most likely to collapse due to political instability or economic turmoil. So this day is coming, and I want to be here on YouTube making that video when Melitopol is liberated, when Sevastopol is liberated, when Donetsk and Luhansk are liberated. Next question is from I Better Tell You the Truth. Hey Jake, do you ever think YouTubers like you will be a target for the Kremlin? Here I mean, for example, threats and possible attacks. Do you take your own precautions? I love what you're doing for Ukraine and the world. I do what I can on my own little scale. Greetings from a defender from Denmark. Well, thank you so much for doing what you can on your scale. Everyone around the world can continue supporting Ukraine and participating just by remaining informed. Concerning your question, Artur Rahe recently came to the United States, and he asked me if I wanted to join him for a subscriber meetup. And I told him, no, there's no way I'm going to do that. And what precautions do I take currently? And I never tell people where and when I'm going to be. I'm not concerned about the Kremlin trying to hurt me, but there are a lot of crazy people in the United States, a lot of crazy people in America who support Russia. And some of those individuals acting on their own might want to confront me or threaten me or do me harm. So I think for the entirety of this war, I'm not going to do any public events. I don't want people to know where and when I will be in the event I have any stalkers out there who wish me harm. So kudos to Artur for being willing to do public meetups with his subscribers. That's something I'm just not going to do, unfortunately, until this war is over. As for the Kremlin targeting me directly, I just don't think I'm high profile enough. My attitude is, as long as Bill Browder is still alive, the Kremlin has bigger fish to fry. If you've not read any of his books, I highly recommend them. I think he's written 3 as of now, talking about his interactions with the Kremlin. If you don't know who Bill Browder is, he used to operate a hedge fund in Russia, and the Kremlin basically stole his money and tried to make it look like he was the guy who stole the money. Bill Browder took this personally, and for the last decade he's been on this crusade to expose Russian corruption, Russian money laundering. He was instrumental in passing the global Magnitsky Act, which has caused a lot of problems for Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin. So the Kremlin really wants to kill this guy. He has to be in their top 5. As long as Bill Browder and people like Garry Kasparov are still making noise on social media, I think they got people higher on the list than a YouTuber with 400,000 subscribers, but I really appreciate your concern. Next question, can U.S. allies still trust the United States? Not if Donald Trump is elected in November. There is a possibility that Donald Trump could be elected president again this November. And if you're an ally of America, I'm sorry, Donald Trump doesn't support you, doesn't believe in you. Donald Trump only likes other dictators. And this is a map showing all of America's defense agreements around the world. You've got most of South America, 1947, NATO, 1949, the Philippines, Australia, New Zealand, Korea, Thailand, Japan. Donald Trump doesn't believe in any of these security agreements. Unless you're paying Donald Trump money, unless you're staying in Trump hotels and buying condos in Trump towers, Trump doesn't care about you. And this is very concerning relating to nuclear proliferation. Given that the Cold War ended over 30 years ago, I just think most of the people who were alive in the 1950s and 60s that remember hiding under their desks in school because of these nuclear drills. Nuclear Armageddon was possible. So the strategy from the United States in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s was to sign all these agreements so none of these countries had to get their own nuclear weapons. Sure, China has them, Russia has them, but as long as the United States has a lot of them and offers this nuclear shield to Canada, Australia, Poland, Spain, then these countries don't have to get their own nukes. More nukes in the world just makes it more likely that one of these nukes could get loose. Potentially a terrorist organization could use one on a major city. I don't want that to happen. But Donald Trump doesn't care about any of these people, any of these countries. He wants to do what Putin is telling him to do and just abandon Europe. This is insane because there's over 1 million Americans living and working in Europe. That's a lot of business and economic interests that would be lost if the Russians somehow militarily got a stronger presence on the continent. I just also want to mention this story. Biden trolls Trump over golf championship trophies. Trump was bragging how he won the club championship trophy and the senior club championship trophy at his golf course. Trump cheats at golf, and everybody in this tournament let an obese 78-year-old man win the tournament. This is like Kim Jong-un Banana Republic dictator stuff. Let the dictator win, let the dictator cheat, let him have the trophy at his own club tournament. It's just very bizarre to me. Next question is from Bombi. Jake, why does American media hardly talk about Ukraine anymore? The simple answer is money. If they try to run a segment on the war in Ukraine and viewership drops, people switch the channel, people tune out. Well, for-profit corporate media responds to viewership going down. For-profit media has its strengths and its weaknesses. One of them is concerning important events such as the war in Ukraine might not get any more media coverage. But I think most people have figured this out and they've already turned to alternative media. You're watching me on YouTube, probably because you don't have as much faith in traditional corporate media. There's about 400,000 people every Sunday who watch Perun videos, hour-long PowerPoint presentations. This is incredible, but these people have already figured it out. If they want solid information from reliable people, they got to go on YouTube. They're just not going to get it from Paramount or NBC or Fox News or any of the other traditional corporate media that has to structure their segments around commercial breaks. Next question is from Godzilla. What is going on in Belgorod, and how is the Free Russian Army doing there? Were the Russians forced to remove any troops from the Ukrainian front lines in response? How does the Russian public respond to the ongoing shelling of Russian towns and cities? Will this campaign support Russian propaganda's call for unity, or show the way for separatists and nationalists all over the Russian Federation? This is a really good question, but I don't have any solid statistics for you about what's going on in Belgorod. When we look at the maps, you can see, some of these little gray areas that have been highlighted, but we've not gotten solid evidence of what these Russian partisans have done in the Belgorod region. There's a lot of shelling, a lot of drone attacks, but as far as ground operations to capture villages or anything like that, this isn't like it was last summer. I think the Freedom of Russia Legion lacks resources because there's an ammunition shortage for the entire Ukrainian military. These guys just don't have the weapons to do potentially what they would like or what they're capable given their current manning. Russia says it will evacuate children from Belgorod after Ukraine shelling. It's having an impact. I'm sure the people of Belgorod are not too happy about this war, but it's a dictatorship, and they don't really have a say. So I think people in Russia just tune it out, even when their city is being shelled by these Russian partisans. I mean, life in Russia sounds miserable, but given you have no power to change anything, that's how these people feel. They just accept it, put their heads back in the sands, and pretend like nothing is wrong. But I do see these videos occasionally online. This one, a mother and her child ran to a designated bomb shelter in Belgorod. The air sirens had gone off, but the shelter was locked. There was no way to get inside. I don't think Russia really cares if their civilians die. Now that we're past Putin's election, I think he's going to care even less about what happens to his civilians in the border areas. This is going to take time. Ukraine needs more resources, but for the Russians who have joined these partisan groups in the Ukrainian military, hopefully these are the future leaders of Russia. When Russia's government collapses, hopefully these guys can return home and actively participate in their country's democratic future. Hi Jake, what happened to all that Russian money that was charitably donated to Mike Johnson? Open Secrets says 90% plus of donations to him are from private organizations, not small donors. This is a story I've resisted talking about here on my channel. Mike Johnson's campaign contributions from a company tied to Russia. Are the Russians, through our campaign finance system, which is a joke, there's dark money coming in from everywhere around the world, but are the Russians trying to get money to Mike Johnson to make Mike Johnson like Russia more? I think yes. But is Mike Johnson doing a quid pro quo, or is he seeking out this money from Russia? I don't think so, because Mike Johnson doesn't need money. Louisiana's 4th Congressional District is a safe Republican district, and I can scroll down and show you recent elections. Mike Johnson was elected in 2016 with 65% of the votes, re-elected in 2018 with 64% of the votes, re-elected in 2020 with 60% of the votes, and in 2022 he ran unopposed. There wasn't even a Democrat on the ballot. So when you run unopposed, you don't really need to ask for campaign dollars. This is why I don't mention this story. I don't think Mike Johnson is seeking out Russian money. But are there Russians trying to get money to Mike Johnson? Absolutely. Next question. Is getting the discharge petition through realistic at this point? Seeing as it has taken so long, if yes, what needs to happen to get the remaining congressmen to sign it? At the moment, 191 House members have signed the discharge petition to get an up or down vote on the Senate's bipartisan $60 billion aid package. House members can't sign it when the House is not in session. The House goes back into session on either Monday or Tuesday. And we need 218 members to sign this. So there's probably about 25 House Democrats who haven't signed it, and only a single House Republican. This is conservative Republican Ken Buck. He's resigning from Congress this month in protest of Donald Trump and MAGA. Ken Buck keeps an AR-15 in his congressional office. This is one of the most conservative members of Congress. But he's fed up with MAGA and Donald Trump. And of course, he supports our allies around the world, and he wants to help defeat Russia. So what we need, and I think this is still a possibility, is for about 20 House Republicans to sign this discharge petition. None have signed it so far, because they don't want to put their name on it if it doesn't succeed. Donald Trump is the nominee, is the leader of the Republican Party. Mike Johnson is the leader of the Republicans in the House. They don't want any members signing it. So when you offend or cross the leader of your party, you get punished. You lose committee assignments, you lose campaign dollars, you lose access, you're not invited to meetings. And with a lot of Trump supporters, you and your family are going to get death threats if you do anything that Donald Trump doesn't want. So these House Republicans who do support Ukraine, but they haven't signed the discharge petition, they're only going to do it as soon as they know it'll succeed, and they're all going to do it as a group to spread out the blame, to spread out the hate, as MAGA supporters in America who love Russia are going to start targeting and threatening these Republicans. Next question. I would like to see an international law brought out on crimes against humanity that allows the seizure of funds from war criminals to clean up their crimes. Not years after the damage has occurred, but promptly. Where would you need to go to request that that be looked at, or do you think it's possible? Thank you. The United Nations is not a world governing body. It's more like an extracurricular activity for sovereign nations. So this isn't a UN thing. This would have to be a legal precedent set up in each individual country or governing entity. So if the European Union in the EU Parliament wants to make this law, that if somebody is guilty of crimes against humanity, maybe they're found guilty in the ICJ or the International Criminal Court, then yes, their frozen assets in EU banks can be seized and then given to the victim as reparations. Each individual country would have to have this own identical law. Canada, the United States, Japan, Switzerland, the UK. And when you look at lists of largest banks by assets under management, sure, the top 4 are all Chinese banks, but this is basically an internal system. So largest banks in the West, JP Morgan, Bank of America, HSBC. You've got some French banks, some Japanese banks. There's Barclays, Spain. If this is a possibility that assets of dictators and authoritarians can be seized and given to victims, then a lot of dictators aren't going to want to keep their money in Western banks. It's going to make them nervous, and they're going to find other countries without these kinds of laws to store their money there. Not a good answer. I think your question, you obviously have a good heart and you're a good person and you want to do what's right. But for most of the people working at these Western banks, they're just there to make a profit for themselves and their shareholders. They have no ethical problems doing business with dictators around the world. And dictators around the world love doing business with Western banks because we have so many legal protections. Dictators in Africa are not going to want to keep their money in Chinese banks because they don't trust China. China doesn't have legal protections and the rule of law. Next question is from Tony. Will the Ukraine financial aid package finally pass Congress? Yes, I do think something hopefully this month will pass if everyone's not an idiot about it. Johnson faces new pressure from Democrats on foreign aid. One, Johnson could be removed by his own MAGA caucus. Marjorie Taylor Greene has initiated a motion to vacate the chair. So Democrats could give him votes to let him keep his job if he just schedules a vote on military aid for Ukraine. The discharge petition can still go through if we can get 20 House Republicans to sign it. The third option is traditional Reagan Republicans just keep resigning from Congress until the Democrats have a majority. All three of these are very strong possibilities, and nobody in America knows what's going to happen this month. But a lot of people are laser focused on this. There's not really any other pressing agenda issues. The budget here in the United States was finally passed. So let's hope, fingers crossed, that we can somehow nail Speaker Johnson down and force him to allow a vote. Next question. I've been wanting to ask this for a while. If Matt Gaetz, who has obvious Chinese and Russian sympathies, became Secretary of Homeland Security, how would the Pentagon or CIA deal with this situation? To begin, if you don't know who Matt Gaetz is, he's a MAGA Republican from the state of Florida, and the guy's a serious creep. And if Trump were to win in November and try and nominate Gaetz for a cabinet position, well, he's got to get confirmed by the Senate. And even if the Republicans win a couple Senate seats and they have a majority, they're never going to get 51 votes to confirm Matt Gaetz to a cabinet position. So I think even if Trump wins, he's in a lot of trouble getting anybody confirmed in the Senate, as there are lots of traditional Republicans like Lisa Murkowski and Snow from Maine who are never going to vote for any of these MAGA nuts to have actual power. And I just want to talk about Matt Gaetz for a second because this guy is super creepy. Meet the Sugar Daddy website from the Matt Gaetz scandal. Matt Gaetz was paying women for sex that he met online, a website called Seeking Arrangement, and Matt Gaetz hooked up with a 17-year-old and took her on a trip across state lines. So, Matt Gaetz, in my opinion, is guilty of child sex trafficking. The charges from the DOJ were dropped because the woman didn't want to cooperate, didn't want to ruin her life, being part of a scandal with a very powerful U.S. House member. Matt Gaetz used to brag about taking erectile dysfunction drugs with energy drinks so he could go all night. This is according to a Republican senator. And I just have to play this clip. This is Republican Oklahoma Senator Markwayne Mullin stating that Matt Gaetz had shown him sex videos of him on the floor of Congress and bragged about crushing ED medicine with energy drinks. So I'm going to share just part of this clip.
You got to think about this guy. This is a guy that the media didn't give a time of day to after he was accused of sleeping with an underage girl. And there's a reason why no one in the conference came and defended him, because we had all seen the videos he was showing on the House floor that all of us had walked away of the girls that he had slept with. He'd brag about.
Matt Gaetz is showing sex videos on the floor of the House to other Republican members of the House.
How he would crush ED medicine and chase it with an energy drink so he could go all night. This is obviously before he got married. And so when that accusation came out, no one defended him, and then no one on the media would give him a time of the day. All of a sudden he found fame because he opposed the Speaker of the House back in November, and he's always stayed.
Obviously, this was all before he got married. This guy who likes doing drugs and paying for sex, surely he's a good person now. This is one of the most important figures in the MAGA movement. I don't understand these people. Next question. I've often heard it said that Americans don't learn enough about the rest of the world, history, geography. Do you think this is a significant factor in trying to communicate foreign policy issues to the general public, or is it political leadership just not framing things properly? It's both. There's an astonishing level of ignorance in the general population of America, which makes it even more important for our political leaders who are informed to be responsible, to guide people and give them good information. You can watch these clips. This is Jimmy Kimmel interviewing random people on the street, and these random people on the street can never name the vice president or say what century the Civil War was in or find most countries on a map. Now, people walking the streets of Hollywood Boulevard are not representative of the American population, so let's be fair. But Americans just live in their own bubble. Here is a superimposed image of the United States, same latitude, over Europe. And the United States is 50 states with different geographies and different education systems, different cultures. The Midwest is very different from the East Coast or the Deep South or the Pacific Northwest or the Great Plains. So Americans have enough space and people and stories and information, so there's not a lot about the rest of the world that gets in because we're already so massive. This is one of my favorite pictures that I recently saw. This is the high-speed rail network of China overlapped on the United States. When you think about how big China is, 1.3 billion people. In the United States, we don't really have high-speed rail. It'd be awesome if we did. But I think for Europeans, when they think about America as being one country, I don't think they get it, how big, diverse, and somewhat chaotic the United States really is. Let me hit you with some statistics I like about Americans. Only 43% of Americans have a passport, while 52% do not. A majority of Americans have never even been outside of the country to either Canada or Mexico, which are the number one and number two places that Americans ever visit. A new nationwide survey found 29% of Americans still live in their hometowns. 1/3 of Americans have never left the town that they were born in. For a small country, that might make sense, but given that everywhere in the United States, same language, same currency, it's really easy to move around. But most people, and this is just human nature, they want to stick with what they're comfortable with. And while stationed in the military, I lived for 4 years in a very small town called Minot, North Dakota. Population 47,000. So here's the United States. I'm going to zoom in for you here. Zooming in, let's see here, yeah. Here's Minot Air Force Base. This is where the nuclear fields are, the ICBMs for the Minuteman III. And I lived in the town of Minot for 4 years. And most Americans live in these small towns. Foxholm, Surrey, Ruthville, Riga, Simcoe. It's just endless. These small towns in every direction, and most people never leave these small towns. And there's nothing wrong with that. I want to say that. You can be comfortable and familiar and also successful and happy staying in the town you were born in your whole life. But I think, just everyone thinks about New York City, Miami, Los Angeles, Chicago, the big cities. But a minority of Americans live in those big cities. Dear Jake, dear supporters of Ukraine and tireless fighters for democracy, a second front back in the 1940s undoubtedly marked the turning point in the fight against the tyranny of Nazi Germany. Will a second front be needed again today, this time against the tyranny of the Russian Federation, and how should this look like? Hope this topic will be interesting to many of you. Cheers. Yes, we need a second front, and that second front is Belarus. I think something's going to happen to Lukashenko, and that's the opportunity for the people of Belarus to get their country back. If the people of Belarus do nothing, once Lukashenko dies, Putin will hold a fake referendum, absorb Belarus, and then mass conscript all the men to go die fighting Poland, Finland, and the Baltics. So it's in the best interest of the people of Belarus maybe to start preparing now, but I do think this is the second front to get their independence, to really become Western. Do the people of Belarus want freedom of speech, fair representation, a government free of corruption? Do they want to finally shake off the old Soviet lifestyle? I don't know, but there's definitely weakness. Given the mass protests we saw in Belarus in 2021, with how many Belarusians have fled the country and are living in exile, feeding information back to their home country, hoping for an opportunity. It'd be nice. It'd be nice if Belarus became that second front and could help Ukraine a little bit. Final question is a good one. As a typical American, maybe even a conservative, did you see MAGA coming? No, I didn't think someone as unethical as Donald Trump would ever gain such a large following. But I did know that the establishment in the traditional two parties had just been going too long. People were sick of it. And I can sum this up with the Bush family. In Republican politics, George Bush Sr. was on the vice presidential ticket with Ronald Reagan in 1980. So in 1980, if you're a Republican voter, you voted for Bush and Reagan. 1984, you voted for Bush again. 1988, Bush is the presidential nominee. Dan Quayle is his vice president, so you voted for Bush again. 1992, guess what? You're voting for Bush again for president. Skip ahead to 2000, we've now got Bush Jr., his son. 2004, once again, you're voting for Bush again. We finally got a break with Mitt Romney and John McCain losing in 2008 and 2012. But then the establishment tried to give us another Bush, Jeb Bush, Bush's brother. And I could tell that Republicans were fed up and they wanted something different. And the Clintons aren't much better. Voting for Clinton in 92 and 96 and then being told in 2016 as a Democrat, well, now you got to vote for this guy's wife. I don't want to discredit her own accomplishments as a senator, but I'd be cool if we amended the Constitution and it said, if somebody is ever elected president, their spouse and their immediate children are now ineligible to run for president. I don't like these family dynastic policies. You could say that's unfair, but there's 330 million people in America. I think we can find someone else to be the nominee. So Trump is a reaction to the Bushes and the Clintons and the establishment trying to give us these dynastic families. If you hate government, if you hate a certain group of people, you hate Muslims, you hate gays, lesbians, trans people, if you hate immigrants, if you hate atheists, vegans, whatever, then Trump's your guy. He's an avatar. He's an avatar for hate and rage and discontent. And even if Trump just goes to Washington, D.C. and destroys everything, Trump supporters view that as a victory. Remember, most people live in these small towns like Williston, and Washington, D.C. is very far away. Everyone there seems elitist and out of touch, and they hate those people. I get it, but I personally think Trump is not good for America. Okay, that's all for this Q&A. I really appreciate the questions. Doing this once a month is a break for me. Something interesting to talk about when I get questions not related to Ukraine sometimes. I appreciate you all. If you made it this far, you're a super fan, a super supporter. I get to tell everyone every day I have the greatest job in the world, making YouTube videos, and I will be here making YouTube videos in support of Ukraine until Russia is defeated. That's all for this video. Thanks, everyone.